All right, welcome back, 7th through 8th grade. We have our sniglet, emptia. Emptia is the excess tortilla left at the ends of a burrito. I thought that was great because that happens to me every time I eat a burrito. That extra tortilla with no meat and all the good stuff is gone. As my grandmother would say, don't run it through the system. This is taken from bayonetenglish.com. I realized I neglected to say that last week, and I realized too that I told you the word was churro last week. Well, I realized too late that autocorrect had changed churro, which is what it was supposed to be, to churro. And not only that, I didn't acknowledge where it was from because I'm using a new list. There are sniglets all over the place. And so the last week and this week are both from Bayonet English. Our Shakespeare quotation is from The Merchant of Venice. And this is a phrase with bated breath. The picture here is it's somebody holding their breath, waiting excitedly or nervously for the outcome. It's, what's going to happen? And so you'll hear people use this expression, I waited with bated breath. Or I watched on with bated breath. And that is what it has come to mean today, although I'm not sure exactly what bated meant at the time of the writing. That would be an interesting word study. And then the Proverbs of today I took from James, which is the New Testament Proverbs. And there's a whole section in there about the tongue as well. James 3:8 from the NKJV says, but no man can tame the tongue. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poise. This is just a description acknowledging that the tongue is harder to tame than even animals, the rest of the chapter says. It's like an animal, and that in our lifetime, we will not conquer it. That doesn't mean we don't try. But it says it's an unruly evil, full of deadly poise. Those are pretty extreme words, but I think it describes accurately how damaging our tongue can be if we allow it, if it's uncontrolled. So in a class that we talk about words, it's good to be aware of the damaging effects of our words. All right, we're going to try something new here. We are going to try to use a new program. I want you to see a literary analysis paper written by an 8th grader just recently. And I am going to illustrate some of the things we're talking about. We're going to spend some time over the next few weeks continuing to refine our paper. Now, if you already turned this in for another class, like most of you did, you can use this for your revision. If you are just taking my class, then we're going to continue to refine this paper and edit it together. So first of all, I want to show you how important your outline is. Now on the left side of the screen, you'll see a full sentence outline. This outline matches the funnel method that we've talked about, which is shaped like a funnel, hence its name. You have the introductory paragraph, the first body sentence, the second, however many you need, until you get to the conclusion paragraph. Okay, that is your funnel shape. That's not how your words are actually shaped. If you see the outline on the left, it does not look like that, nor does the paper on the right look like a funnel. That is more of a figure of speech, talking about how the content should be organized. All right, so I'm just going to illustrate for you how important the outline is with the paper, the actual paper. Something to keep in mind is I prefer students to start with an outline, but the truth of the matter is you cannot write a perfect outline and then from there write a perfect paper. There's normally some back and forth. You want to start out with a good solid outline, but a lot of times you'll start writing your paper and you'll have to go back and tweak your outline. But in the end, you need a really tight outline and a really organized paper. Your outline is like the skeleton, and your paper is like the fleshed out body. So just like muscle and connective tissue and fat and organs all hang off of the bones. The bones in this analogy would be the outline on the left, and the fleshing out, the explaining, the illustrating, demonstrating is on the right. That's your finished product. It should read and it should logically be sensible for the reader to follow. But the outline, of course, should be very organized. It's also been said that if you cannot write well, you cannot think well, because the writing is just showing what is already in the mind. So if you struggle with writing, part of it is you might not understand how much work is involved. Writing does not just flow from the pencil or the pen or the fingers onto the paper. It is a lot of back and forth. Once you understand how much back and forth it is, then you can produce a good copy. So what we're looking at is a first draft. I'm going to be editing it and sending it back to the author to to clean up. But the most important thing I look at when I'm editing or grading anything, not just papers, books, articles, is I'm looking for the logical flow represented by the outline. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go through and we're going to highlight in the paper where the outline shows up so that you can see exactly where the outline should go, because this is a student of mine who I've been teaching for a while. And so it has been drilled into this person's brain where the outline goes. So I thought it'd be good. I did ask permission if I could use it as an example. This student wrote this paper before I decided to include it. So I thought it would be good to illustrate on this. So let's go through now. Now, I'm not going to be able to highlight, I guess, with the Apple Pencil, I don't think, but I can underline. So we're going to underline. So first of all, on the left, you see the introductory sentence. This is the first sentence of the introduction, and it should fall right here at the beginning. Okay, and it does, as you can see. So he starts off generally enough that he identifies in the very first sentence of a literary analysis paper what story or what work he's working with. Okay, and that's right there. And then notice he has no standalone be verbs. He says that Joseph's story is the subject and the verb is houses. Now I'm going to gripe a little bit about his verb. I'm not crazy about it, but I cannot complain. It is not a be verb. For that, I'm very happy. I'm glad he doesn't say there are many literary devices in the Joseph story. Now that I would have him rewrite. So the Joseph story from Genesis 37 through 50, that's our identifying our work, our source for this paper, houses many literary devices. So he starts off broad, but he doesn't start off so broad that I think a lot of beginner writers struggle with. Like some beginner writers say, there are many good stories in the world. The Bible has many good stories. In the Bible, there's a specific story called Joseph. See, that's way too general. So we're going to start narrow enough that we tell our reader exactly where we are from the beginning. We're talking about literary devices in the story of Joseph. So he takes us then from this general topic sentence and he narrows it down to the point that he gives us our thesis. This is where the thesis goes. So if you look on your left, we have this thesis, the exact same one that is in the outline. One other thing to watch out for, I have seen students turn in outlines for their papers that do not actually match their paper. Or they turn in outlines and they don't arrange them where they should go. They might match, but not in this arrangement. So watch carefully. So we have our topic sentence right here, and then we have our thesis. Now let me also point out with this thesis, what is the subject? The subject is foreshadow. What is the verb? Enhances. What does it enhance? The Joseph story in two major ways. So we have our 3 elements that we talked about last week. where the subject of the paper is the subject of the thesis. The verb tells me how it interacts with how the subject interacts with the story or the theme, and then the rest of the predicate finishes off the thought about that verb. The one piece he's missing, although I will not complain, is the source, which is the Genesis account of Joseph, which he introduces in the topic sentence. So he did identify it, even though it's not in the sentence. That's fine. He has to identify it in the introductory paragraph. All right, notice on the left our first major point. First, foreshadow predicts Joseph's greatness. That is point 1. It falls in the first sentence immediately following the thesis. And notice that point A under 1 follows immediately after. Now your A's, I'm going to take a second and look at point 1 and point 2. You may have point 3 and point 4. You may have 4 or more points. But typically a paper of this size has 2 to 3, maybe 2 to 4. Notice they are parallel with each other. By that I mean they share similar structure, sentence structure, and they might even share the same subject or the same verb, maybe both. So look at this first point. First, foreshadow predicts Joseph's rise to greatness. Now look at the second point. Second, foreshadow parallels Joseph's life with Jesus's life. Both of them still keep foreshadow as a subject, and that is okay. Some of you might think, oh no, that sounds too repetitive or redundant. Not in the case of logic. In the case of logic, in your outline, you want it to be repetitive, parallel, very clear. It's like organizing socks in a sock drawer. You want to first look at all your socks and see what you have most of. If you have black socks and white socks, then that's how you organize it. You don't organize, you might have 1 or 2 multicolored socks, but you don't give the multicolored socks an entire drawer. You would divide it according to what you have a majority of, and you'd organize it that way. This is it's the same principle. We're organizing information. So we notice that we're still talking about foreshadow, and we're still talking about the effects on the storyline. One of the roles of foreshadow, it predicts Joseph's rise, and the other time it parallels Joseph's life with Jesus' life, which is still to come. So that is a great first outline. Let's continue. Now let's look at point A under point 1. It says, for instance, Joseph's dreams predict this rise to greatness. The most important thing about your A's and B's and C's are that they are there to showcase, to prove, to give evidence for the point that they're under. So the point that we're proving is that foreshadow predicts Joseph's rise to greatness. So in the body of this paragraph, I'm going to prove to you how that happens by using text from the story itself. We'll often use transition phrases like, for instance. The other point is also, I like to use a lot of them, phrases like, for example, or according to, etc. So phrases like that are like pointing a finger at the evidence. So point A says, for instance, Joseph's dreams predict this rise to greatness. That's point A, and that's exactly where it should go. Now let's go find point B. Point B is at the beginning of another paragraph. This is not always how you will organize it. Sometimes A and B go in the same paragraph, but it's neater to separate them out. And notice it's the topic sentence of, again, another paragraph. So see our organization here. Then let's go find point 2. Point 2 is going to be at the beginning of another paragraph. Second, foreshadow parallels Joseph's life with Jesus's life. And we're going to find A, B, and C under it. Notice that A, B, and C all are parallel to each other. Let's read them before we go find them. A says, for example, Joseph's treatment from his brothers symbolizes Jesus's treatment from his chosen people. Point B, also Joseph's coat symbolizes Jesus's blood. And C, lastly, Joseph's role of salvation symbolizes Jesus's role of salvation. So here we have parallel verbs. Every verb is symbolize, symbolize, symbolize. And we even are parallel in the ideas. We have Joseph's treatment, Joseph's coat, and Joseph's role. So we first point to Joseph, then we point to Jesus. Do you see the organization? So let's find all of those. So if this is point 2, point A follows immediately after with a clue, for example. And then point B, 2B, and point 2C. So this is 2C, this is 2B. And then at the very end, in the very first sentence of the conclusion, we have our restatement of the thesis. Now this is a little advanced, but I wanted to tell you that oftentimes we think that a restatement means a microwaved, leftover, reorganized conclusion topic sentence from this original thesis. In fact, a lot of people do this by just switching the words around and making it passive voice. I'll show you one of the ways they would do it. Let's look at the thesis over on the left. Foreshadow enhances the Joseph story in 2 major ways. Here is how a lot of students would give me a restatement. In 2 major ways, the Joseph story is enhanced by foreshadow. So I'm going to help you out here. That is not a good restatement of the thesis. That is not what we mean by restatement. What we mean is that you are holding before your audience. You're pointing back to the original goal of the paper, but you're also doing it in a way that is fresh and new and maybe even presents some new information. Remember those striped socks? Maybe this is where you put them if you only have a couple of them. But what you're doing is you're tying all of the strings together, the loose ends, and you're saying, this is the point now of my paper. In conclusion, he says, God uses foreshadow throughout the Joseph story, showing that no ordinary men could write the Bible. Oh, wow, that's cool. He shows that there's a bigger reason for foreshadow in the story of the Bible. In most books, foreshadow doesn't contain any such significance, but he makes it even more significant than that. So my goal really is to go through and show you how your outline should look in your paper. If you cannot underline, highlight your outline like this in your paper, then you need to do some reorganizing. This is one of the first major ways you should revise your paper. Revision is hard. When I used to write papers in college, I probably would have somewhere between 20 and 40 revisions just on my own before I gave them back to my teacher. So I encourage you, I don't think you'll have that many, but I encourage you to look at your outline as the most important part of your revision. You'll have misspellings, you'll have little punctuation things you need to fix, and those your teacher will also point out. But the most important thing is the outline. It represents the logic. It represents your thought process. Another thing to think about if you're struggling with how to organize an outline is to think about how your pastor preaches on a Sunday. Most pastors actually make it their practice to preach from an outline. Now, while there are many differences between preaching and writing, and some of those will point, well, not preaching, but public speaking and writing, there are many differences. But one thing that preachers, that we can't draw from, that we shouldn't emulate in our writing, one thing is very, very good, and that is the strong logical content and the structure and the outline. At our church, our pastors use outlines when they preach, and they are always very organized, very parallel, and it's a great way to practice looking at the structure. And then all the words that they say from the pulpit, all the filling out, that is what the body of their paper would be. And anytime they quote scripture, that would be their evidence, their A's, B's, and C's. Very much like a literary analysis paper. So pay attention in church, take good notes, look at the outline, practice writing outlines that are parallel, that are organized, that are logical, and that give examples. Next week, we're going to talk more about the examples and how to do that well and how to use quotations in your writing. So if you haven't gotten there yet, that's fine. I really want you to look at the paper you've been working on and make sure that your outline and structure is very, very strong. If your parent or teacher can underline the outline and it matches the outline on the left, then you've done an excellent job. All right, I'll see you next week.